Today we're going to be talking about habits in general, and then we're going to kind of, for the first half, and then we're going to be talking about mini habits and specifically using this particular tool to get motivation or momentum going in your life. So the first question that naturally comes up, when I talk about habits is, what good are habits? It's like, why do we want to pursue habits? What is the value of habits? Gretchen Rubin, a very famous science writer, said, habits are the invisible architecture of our lives. I've always loved that quote because it gives you this sense of why habits matter and how they matter in this very powerful way, but they're often invisible, right, to us. I want you to think about your brain here, because your brain is this kind of habit-making machine. It will make habits with or without your permission. So your brain's not going to ask you, are you sure that you want to form that one? That one might cause you problems down the road. Your brain doesn't do that. Invisibly in the background, your brain is looking for patterns in your behavior. Your brain's a master pattern detector. And then when it spots a pattern would be you doing something a few days in a row. It's going to naturally and automatically start turning that behavior, taking it from being a decision to turning it into a habit. Let me try to illustrate how this works. So decisions take place in our conscious mind. They are effortful. They are expensive. Decisions cost us a lot of neural energy, a lot of metabolic energy. It's hard for the brain to make decisions. And your brain doesn't want to do this because your brain is an energy Scrooge. So your brain being an energy Scrooge is, it has plenty of it, right? It just doesn't want to spend it. Think of Uncle Scrooge, right? Loaded with dough, just doesn't want to dish it out. Wants to hoard it, wants to conserve it, right? He's a miser. And so our brains are cognitive misers. They conserve energy at all costs. And so what your brain is really doing with habits is trying to conserve energy. In other words, your brain is kind of indifferent as to whether or not the habit is good or bad for you. What your brain really cares about is that it's a habit and not a decision, because that saves energy. Your brain is really habit agnostic, is another way to say this. Again, energy Scrooge. Your brain has its own agenda, its own priorities. And if you know those priorities, you'll know, oh, my brain's up to this. And that's why it's forming, for example, quote, bad habits, right? So again, your brain will outsource any decision it can to the unconscious, because again, decisions take place in the conscious part of our brain, and habits take part in the unconscious or subconscious part of our brain. And that is, in fact, why they're so much easier to run. Decision-making, any conscious activity is incredibly neurally expensive. It takes a lot of energy to do those activities. Your brain would really prefer not to do them. All right, so this would be an example of a habit by default, right? So when we just allow our habits to kind of form without much intention behind them, we're really kind of allowing our environment to tell us what habits we do have and what habits we won't have or don't have. We're not in control of that process. We're not in the driver's seat of that habit-making machinery. It's just doing its thing. And so I want you to think about yourself as a habit designer, as a habit architect, to use that quote back from Gretchen Rubin I used at the beginning. If habits are the invisible architecture of our lives, then who's architecting them? Is it randomness? Is it the environment? Is it the people around us? Or is it you? And so as you get clear on the value of designing your own habits, you'll start realizing, oh, all right, so my brain's going to make these habits with or without my permission. The only question is, which habits? And who's guiding that ship? And if I get squarely in control of that process, I can move that habit-making machinery toward my own goals. I can direct that habit-making system to produce the kinds of outcomes I want in my life over time. And this skill set of habit formation, which we're talking about, is a learnable skill that anyone can learn. Any guesses how many days it takes to form a new habit? Let me just say that it's shorter than it actually takes. The most common answer ends up being around 21 days. But scientists have actually shown that, oh my goodness, it takes more than that. It's around 66. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the truth is habits take longer than we expect. So it's about 2 months. Now, even worse news is that harder habits take even more time. So for example, exercise is a pretty difficult habit for most of us. 91 days is what scientists have shown exercise takes to really get into a secure habit, a stable habit, one that's going to stick around as opposed to just disappear. Now, good news is easier habits do take a little bit less time. Mini habits. Let me give you a quick example. So this water bottle I'm holding up here, it's a nice idea in the morning to rehydrate. We typically dehydrate at night because we breathe out a lot of moisture. So in the morning, if I were to fill this up in the sink, set it on my nightstand, and then drink it first thing in the morning, that's going to take me, maybe 2 to 3 minutes. But that 2 to 3 minutes, compared to another habit, is quite a bit easier. So easier habit, this new habit of drinking this water bottle every morning might take me 1 month. Many habits, BJ Fogg, professor at Stanford, we'll get into in a bit later, estimates it take about 1 month to form mini habits. So 1 to 3 months is kind of the range. 2 months, 66 days is the average. All right, why does it take so long? This is the Nevada desert between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. You're looking at a view of that desert from a freeway called I-15. So I know some of you have probably driven on this road. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about here, but I want you to imagine pulling over to the shoulder of I-15 and then actually driving on the sagebrush. What happens at the speed of the car? Instantly drops from 70, 75 miles an hour to like 5 or 10, probably more like 5 miles an hour. The conversation with your friend or significant other drops. You don't have that conversation with them anymore because you're so focused on what's in front of you. You tell them to push pause on the conversation. It's bumpy, you're trying to hold on, but it's rough out there. Everything in you wants to get back to the comfort and ease of I-15. However, if you drive on this random patch of earth again and again and again, eventually this will happen. Tire tracks will form. So these tire tracks make driving on this stretch of desert just a little bit easier. It's not amazing, but you can go maybe 10 or 15 miles an hour on these tire tracks. And if enough cars keep doing this, let's call it hundreds or maybe even thousands every day are driving on this random patch of earth, eventually it'll level out even more into a fully formed dirt road. And then you can do 25, maybe 30 miles an hour. So you're incrementally making that pathway easier and easier and easier to travel on. I want you to imagine the Nevada Department of Transportation folks looking at their satellite images, looking at all the roads in their area, and saying to themselves, oh, wow, there's this one road where we've got hundreds of cars every day driving on it. I don't know what they're doing. I just know that it's needed that we invest some resources in that road. It's critical that we put in some pavement, right, on that road because it's so used. It's the most used dirt road in all of Nevada. And so it makes sense logically that they'd want to invest resources in what is being used. right? That's what's driving that, because resources are a cost. So what makes it worth it? The fact that it's so used. And they may even expand it if it's really used into a multi-lane, freeway. So again, this is kind of how roads and transportation systems kind of change over time. So what does this have to do with the brain? Our brains are these complex interconnected system of neural 2-lane tire tracks, dirt roads, 2-lane highways, and 6-lane freeways. So everything you do, every behavior has an underlying neurological correlate. In other words, your brain fires in a particular area of your brain when you brush your teeth every day. And for example, this nice, smooth 6-lane freeway here, that would be brushing your teeth with your dominant hand. And if you've never experimented with this, brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand would be the equivalent of driving on one of these little neighborhood roads. It's so awkward. You really have to think about it. If you get every angle and you really feel uncoordinated. The reason isn't because you can't do it. It's because it's difficult to do. Think about trying to get from point A to point B in a big city. If there's no traffic, you're obviously going to take the freeway. Now, you can get from point A to point B taking back roads and neighborhood roads. It's just going to take you so much longer. So, of course, you want to take the most efficient route. So it's the same thing with your brain. Your brain wants to take the most efficient route. It's not very efficient to brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand because there's no neurological neural pathways that are strong enough with your non-dominant hand as compared to your dominant hand. So it's always going to choose the neural pathways that are the most robust. All right, so when it comes to habits, obviously what we're talking about is the changes in your brain as you do certain behaviors again and again and again and again. You build up these neural pathways. You build up these roads in your brain, and they get stronger and stronger and stronger. And the stronger they get, the easier it is to do that behavior. This is why habits become kind of effortless over time, is because your brain is physically changing, and that's why you can actually do that behavior with so much more ease. All right, just in case you think this metaphor is nice but maybe not accurate, it's pretty dead accurate. Let me just zoom into the level of a single neuron. So neurons are look like trees. So if you went outside and ripped out a tree and turned it sideways, that's what a neuron looks like. You're seeing a diagram of one here. You've got the branches at the top of the tree. It's called dendrites. You've got the body of the cell, and then down the trunk of the tree is the kind of pathway that the neural signals or the neurotransmitters actually travel down. And then it's kind of cut off here, but you've got roots at the end, synaptic terminals, where the neurochemicals or neurotransmitters sort of squirt out and connect to the next neuron, and the chain reaction continues. So this happens incredibly fast. But neurons are a communication system, and the things that are being communicated travel down the trunk of the neuron and to the next neuron, and then it continues that communication process. All right. So what are these sausage link looking things on the trunk of our neuron? They look weird, right? It's called myelin sheath. Now, myelin sheath is a really interesting substance. It's made of fatty tissue, and it acts as insulation on the neuron. So the more myelin sheath you have on a single neuron, the faster that neuron will fire. So with low to little myelin, neurons fire at about 2 miles an hour. But with a fully insulated neuron, when you get, and these rings of myelin get wrapped deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, the neuron will fire at up to 200 miles an hour. So think of that range from 2 miles an hour to 200 miles an hour. The raw processing power of a single neuron can increase by 100-fold. It's wild, right? And so that ability, that dormant potential of every single one of your neurons exists within you. And just to like help you understand the mechanism of how this works, you actually have an entire set of neurons that are like the construction workers, the pavers. So they're called oligodendrocytes. Sorry for the long word. They call them oligos in the lab. So your oligos are sitting around, taking it easy, looking at what's going on in the brain, and they're waiting to see what you do today. And the activity or area of the brain that gets used, right? Because every time we do something, our brain is activated and it's working to actually do that thing. The neurons that fire get wrapped with one more layer of myelin. So the oligos sitting around, wait to see what you do. And then whatever you do, whatever area of the brain fires, right? If you go for your morning run, if you, as I mentioned, maybe drink a bottle of water, or maybe you're trying to create a new habit of writing in a gratitude journal, whatever the new habit is, they see if you do that thing. And if you do that thing, they literally wrap those particular neurons with one more layer of myelin that are responsible for that particular behavior. And therefore, that behavior becomes easier and easier and easier to do over time. So again, think about, it's like a construction crew. And every time, we don't, think of it this way. Behavior is the mechanism by which I can change my brain. We become what we do. Brain doesn't care who you are, it only cares what you do. And then based on what you do, it changes itself. So this lovely quote, neurons are a technology that turn experience into biology. Let's say that one more time. Neurons are a technology that turn experience into biology. We physically change our brains based on what we do every day. Pretty rad, right? All right. So here's what this looks like going down, looking at a microscopic view, just so you have a kind of sense of what this looks like. These are the rings of myelin on this outside of the axon. You're looking down the axon. This is how your nervous system works. All right, so what we're talking about, of course, is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the way that brains change, the science of how brains change over time. But what we're really talking about is, my brain is like a muscle. And the more I exercise that particular muscle in particular ways, the stronger that muscle is going to get. So if I want to create a habit, again, of going running every morning, what I'm actually doing is training my brain, those particular parts that are responsible for getting me out the door and then getting me on the run, and then actually doing the run. I'm actually strengthening those neural pathways so that run becomes automatic and effortless, so that when my alarm goes off at 6 a.m., I'm basically halfway out the door before I even realize what I'm doing. That's what you're after with habits. You want these things to become automatic. All right, there's a gentleman named William James. I'm guessing lots of you probably heard of him. He's the father of modern American psychology. Very, very famous professor at Harvard around the turn of the century, last turn of the century. And he said, you want to make your nervous system your ally instead of your enemy. So William James did a lot of writing on habits, how habits work. And what he realized is, so the brain is making habits with or without your permission. You don't want to fight that tendency, that habit-making tendency of your brain. It'll keep doing it whether or not you want it to. What you really want to do is get in control of it. You want to get behind the will of that habit-making machinery. You want to steer it in the direction of your goals and therefore produce the kinds of outcomes that you want. You want to become a master of your nervous system and not have it be the master of you. Now, if this were also easy, I'm probably making it sound a little bit easy, like, we can just snap our fingers and habits appear. Then we'd all have perfect habits, but we don't. We have some good habits and others we'd like to improve. So what keeps us stuck? What are the things what are the habit traps? One is that motivation is like a roller coaster. So sometimes you have really good motivation and sometimes you're really, really low motivation. And it's sort of hard to predict when you might have which kind of motivation, a surge or a trough. That's just the nature of motivation. It's up and down, up and down, up and down. So there's nothing wrong with you when you feel unmotivated. Your body is just doing what bodies do, which is going through energy cycles. Your motivation and energy are tightly linked. In some ways, your energy is your motivation. But your body is going up and down all the time. They're called ultradian rhythms, actually. And you have about 90 minutes of good energy and about a 20-minute trough all throughout the day, right? So these are daytime energy cycles that mirror your nighttime sleep cycles. 90-20, 90-20, 90-20. So feeling unmotivated or exhausted or like you just want to surf social media is not only natural, it's your body just doing what bodies do, which is taking a little break between these high energy periods. Now, the thing about taking a break, right, between those high energy periods is that you don't, how do I say this? Anything that requires a lot of attention is not a break. Anything that requires a lot of attention is not a break. So if it requires very little light attention, going for a walk, taking a nap, maybe any physical movement, yoga, doodling, drawing, anything that's sort of away from work, basically. We work on our laptops usually or our computers. Step away from the computer, go for a walk. That would be the kind of thing that if you feel exhausted, if you feel the urge to be surfing the news or surfing social media or playing video games or whatever, know that that's your brain craving a brain break. It's asking for a brain break. When you feel the urge to distract yourself, what your brain is actually saying is, I need to recharge my battery. And what's hard is that it feels like it's basically reaching for empty calorie brain candy of the internet. Like, I just need a distraction. Now, because our devices are attention heavy, you have to pay close attention, right? Or you're using your attentional muscles essentially while you're on a device. They don't recharge our mental batteries. So they might be fun. That's different. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's not going to actually recharge you. Getting a sort of distance, actually, psychological distance, physical distance from the phone or device is actually what you're really looking for. And nature, and specifically, is one of the things that recharges us the very most. Okay, willpower runs out. This is the other problem, the other habit trap. So willpower running out is very, very common, and it's something that's usually not understood by most people. So think of it like this. You wake up with a certain amount of willpower. Call it 95%. You didn't have a perfect night of sleep. You had a really good night of sleep, right? And as you go throughout your day, you're actually using up that mental energy. You're using up that willpower battery. So by the end of the day, you're really kind of exhausted. You're spent. This is why Ben & Jerry's look so much more delicious in the freezer at 10 p.m. rather than 10 a.m. It's because you're tired at that point. This is why we binge watch Netflix at night and surf Instagram for hours on end at night, because our willpower is on 2%. The brakes went out of our car. They're out of our brain. We have no more braking system in the brain anymore. So all we got is like the urge to doom scroll or whatever. And it's not useful. Right, because we're not understanding what's going on, and so we get trapped into a sort of attentional hijack in a way, because we don't have the same self-control that we usually do when our willpower is a little bit higher. All right, it's also true, for example, why we eat sweets or treats at night. It's because our willpower runs out. I mean, I should just say one thing briefly. One of the things to do, one of the implications for how to manage this is forcing functions. So if you know at night it's going to be tempting to surf your phone, cool. Find a way to get the phone out of sight. That would be good. In other words, charge it in the basement. Just like get it out of the common space, the kitchen, the living room, whatever. Definitely don't charge it on the nightstand. That's probably the most disruptive to our sleep and overall happiness and well-being, because our sleep is linked to doing only sleep in bed and not other activities. I've taken to, and I'll just show you here, I've taken to actually locking my phone in a timed box. You can see the if you're interested in the website, I think it's thekitchensafe.com. But you can actually buy these boxes where you set the timer, you stick the phone in there or the sweets or whatever at night or whenever you feel like you're going to be most tempted. And therefore it locks and you just simply don't have access to them during that vulnerable period. All right, so these are some of the implications for how to work around this willpower problem. But really the biggest one when it comes to forming habits is this tool we're going to start going into now called mini habits. Now, mini habits are one of the most effective ways to get some momentum when it comes to habit formation. So how does this happen, and who invented or came up with or did the research around mini habits? Well, it was this professor at Stanford. His name is B.J. Fogg, F-O-G-G. And he actually calls them tiny habits, but it's the same idea. So B.J. Fogg had this problem, and it's a problem I think a lot of us have had, which is I'm not doing enough exercise. I'm not doing enough exercise. I'd like to do more. And every time, he's saying to himself, every time that I do, set my New Year's resolutions, I fall off the wagon, right? By February or March. And so, we're in a moment right now. It's January 13th. And most of us are setting intentions for 2022. We're kind of on a good, possibly still streak of our new goals. But the reality is we might have set them up wrong or set them up to not work as well as they could. And BJ Fogg kept finding himself in this trap. In other words, he would set up his exercise goals and they'd always fail. So there he is, a behavioral scientist, and he can't change his own behavior. I mean, that's embarrassing, right? So he goes, maybe the problem is maybe, and he looks back at what he's done over the last few years and he realizes that he's very ambitious. He sets these huge, huge goals. And he goes, maybe the problem is that. Maybe I'm just trying too hard. Maybe the goal is too big and I need to shrink it. He says, what if I shrink it so that it's like super small? Maybe so small it feels a little ridiculous. I wonder what that would do. So he decides he's going to do 2 push-ups after he goes pee every single time. So he goes to the bathroom, does his 2 push-ups, back to the office. Goes to the bathroom later on, does 2 push-ups, back to the office. And this happens. So the first week or 2, he's doing 14 to 18 push-ups a day. Nothing too exciting. But he's keeping track and he's noticing, by week 3, he's doing actually quite a bit more than he was doing in the first week or 2. He's doing over 50 push-ups a day. And then by the end of the month, he's doing over 100 push-ups a day. And he finds this pattern curious. And he says, wow, I'm noticing 2 things. Obviously, number 1 is the habit's growing. It's not staying small. So a medium, sort of mini habit's becoming sort of more like it's not quite a medium habit, but it's somewhere between a mini habit and a medium-sized habit. And I'm wildly consistent, whereas before I was very inconsistent. In other words, what he realized was that tiny habits or mini habits prioritize consistency over intensity. And so as he got consistent, wildly consistent with his habits, what he started to do on top of that pattern of consistency is to grow a little bit of intensity over time. So it's like he inverted the pattern. He wasn't like, let's go big or go home. He's like, let's go small. Focus relentlessly on consistency, get that pattern and the behavior and the routine really locked in, and then we'll slowly grow on the intensity. All right. Here's what he found after he does this. He then starts studying this in other people. He brings hundreds of people into his lab and then thousands. He studies them in the home environments. This takes around 10 years or so for him to figure this all out. And here's what he finds. There are these different things that are in tension with each other when it comes to your habits. One is motivation. So you've got high motivation at the top, low motivation at the bottom. And the other is level of difficulty. So you've got easy to do on the right, hard to do on the left. And they're continuum, right? So what he found is everything up and to the right of this green curved line is a successful attempt at changing your behavior. In other words, again, I'm going to use this example of drinking a bottle of water in the morning. For most of us, that's going to take a few minutes. That's fairly easy. So it's on the right-hand side of that horizontal part of the axis. And so if you look to the left, what that's related to, it's motivation. You're just not going to need that much motivation to cross over that green threshold and successfully do the behavior you were attempting to do. Now, exercise, on the other hand, let's call it a 45-minute workout at the gym. You're probably going to want to, inch that, or not going to want to, but the nature of the activity is more difficult. So it's going to inch you further and further toward that hard to do side of the continuum. And therefore, because of that, you're going to need lots of motivation in order to cross over that green threshold. Actually, you're going to need consistently high motivation to cross over that green threshold. Otherwise, what would happen is you'll stay in the habit failure zone. You won't do the behavior. Even maybe if you have decent motivation, you need high motivation. Decent motivation is not enough, right? So this is the tension between motivation and difficulty. All right, we'll come back to that graph, I promise. I pull this up here because often we think about New Year's resolutions and how many New Year's resolutions fail every year. When I ask this question, how many New Year's resolutions fail, I want you to kind of get a number in your own mind. How many do you think fail every year? What percentage? Here's what the data show. Oh, snap. 92% of us are failing at our New Year's resolutions every year. So if you invert that number, 8% of us are succeeding. Oh, that's abysmal. Shoot. So collectively, as a group of humans, us humans are succeeding at our habits, our New Year's resolutions, 8% of the time. Wow. Wow, right? Now, again, I just talked earlier about the brain being very malleable. We can change our brains pretty easily, right? Or the brain is think of it this way, it's built for change. Intrinsic to the nervous system is that it changes. So why are we failing at changing ourselves? The reason I've come to believe that we don't do this, it's not that we can't change, it's that we're not skilled at change yet. In other words, change, behavior change or habit formation is just a skill set. Now I have an 8-year-old daughter, and she's never taken piano lessons, but we've talked about it. She's interested. And I want you to imagine me putting in front of her a complicated piece of music. Let's call it Mozart's Magic Flute, something like this. And let's just say I have a thing for that piece of music. And I say, actually, I think that's an opera. I put it in front of her and I say, sweetie, why don't you just play that for Dad? Why don't you play that for Daddy? Please, I would love to hear this. Why don't you tickle the ivories? She'd look at me and she'd be like, Dad, you're crazy. And I'd be like, well, what do you mean? I would love to hear it. Why can't just please play it? And she'd be like, well, Dad, duh, I've never taken lessons. And I'd be like, oh yeah, that's right. You haven't taken lessons. So of course you're not going to be able to play it. This makes sense, right? Naturally makes sense when it comes to sports or music or language or whatever we're trying to learn. If you haven't trained in that thing, it makes sense that you wouldn't be good at that thing. However, behavior change is the exact same thing. Habit formation, being good at changing our habits, the exact same thing. It's a skill set. And skill sets take training, learning, coaching, and practice, most of all, practice. And so it's that practice bit that most of us never got. When would you have learned to go to habit forming class? Obviously, we were too busy studying algebra and geometry to do that. Think of this, it's so crazy. The central skill of a good life is the ability to change our own behavior, right? If you can do that, you're going to have a good life. And you don't learn it anywhere. I mean, maybe a couple tips from one of your parents who happen to sort of be good, decent at habits, maybe. But generally speaking, there's a vacuum of knowledge here. Nobody knows how to do this because we've never taught it. And the science, truthfully, until the last 10 to 20 years, didn't have a good grasp on this, but we now do. We now know how to do this. So behavior change is a trainable thing. And one of the things that my course and the other things I do and offer are about how to do that kind of change process and build this kind of skill set we're talking about. All right, I told you to get back to the graph. So why do so many people fail at their New Year's resolutions? The main reason is that most people start in the upper left corner of this graph, where it's hard. Think of what people are posting on social media at the beginning of the year. They're posting their 6 awesome goals, how they're going to have a 6-pack by June. They're going to increase the revenue in their business by 50% or maybe even double it. Their relationship, with their significant other is going to look like some romantic, comedy or something. They're going big. Whatever it is, they're going big. Their sleep goals, they're going to be getting in bed at 9 a.m. every night. And then life happens. That's life. Sometimes they're above that green line, having a successful behavior change attempt, and other times they're below it. They're above it, and then family comes into town. They're above it, and then one of their kids gets sick. And then life just keeps throwing curveballs. So the actual implementation of this new habit routine looks more like this. It's very inconsistent. And by the end of that, they feel so demoralized by all that inconsistency that they just give up. I don't know if you've ever felt that. I certainly have. It's demoralizing to feel like someday I'm missing 2 to 3 days a week on my new habit routine, right? So many habits are no. We're starting in the wrong corner. Let's start on the bottom right, where it's easy to do this new behavior because it's so small. And then, again, prioritizing consistency, maybe we can, over time, once that pattern of consistency is in place, slowly increase the intensity and get the behavior to be more and more difficult, or more of a fully formed habit, or a more robust habit. So how do mini habits work? Why are they so successful, whereas other strategies tend to fail? Number one, and I've emphasized this repeatedly because I think this is one of the most important things of today's presentation, is that they do, in fact, prioritize consistency. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Technically, this was Will Durant summarizing Aristotle, but as the quote goes. The point is, repeatedly. What do we do repeatedly? It's that repetition, right, that builds those oligos, kick into gear, build those myelin pathways on the neural pathways, wrap those in myelin, strengthen those neurons so that it becomes easier and easier and easier to do that behavior. We become our habits. And again, in this process, if we do it well, we focus and prioritize consistency, it will lead to deeply ingrained habits, which again, bear fruit over time. Whereas if we focus on intensity the way most of us do at this time of year, yeah, we might have an amazing couple of weeks working out for an hour and a half at the gym every day. I mean, it feels good, like in the moment, but it's not going to be sustainable. It's just not going to be sustainable, and so it won't lead to habits. So think of it this way: consistency beats intensity every time. I want to share with you, this is a picture of my exercise clothes. I started a running habit in beginning of 2019, January 2019. And one of the things that I started doing was putting my exercise clothes, instead of in the closet, just on my nightstand. It seems super basic, almost like, what's the big deal, right? It seems like, well, does that really matter? Turns out it does. And the reason is because of a principle called friction. So the more friction, the more steps you have to take between what you're doing right now and what you want to be doing, the more decisions you have to make or steps you have to take, the less likely you are to do that behavior. So getting up, it's a cold morning, got to get up and out from under the down comforter, got to walk into the closet. It's dark. I can't hear. My 1-year-old's like on the edge of maybe getting up. So I'm trying to be quiet. I'm looking for my exercise clothes. Just think of this, right? I'm looking. I'm kind of feeling around in the dark. I don't want to turn on the light. I can't quite feel the right shirt in shorts. Obviously right now I'd be wearing sweats, but in the summertime, it's just not there. And then I'm like, oh shoot, it's in the laundry hamper. We washed the clothes, we just didn't fold them. And so, oh man, I've got to like go to the next room, sort through all that pile of clothes. I mean, just like friction. You know what my brain really wants to do before I did all that stuff? Stay in bed. Onto the down comforter. I mean, how annoying is all that stuff, right? Reduce the friction. Take out all the decision-making. Make it so easy you basically trip into the habit, which is what's happening with these exercise clothes. I've gone one step further now with this particular thing. I now sleep in them. You heard it here. I sleep in my exercise clothes. And the reason is because it's one more step I took out of the process. And so the only thing I have to put on in the morning is my shoes. That's the only thing I don't sleep in. And I have multiple sets, so it's not a problem and that sort of thing. I've worked that out. However, it's amazing. It's amazing what it does. Amazing. All right. Number 2, mini habits guarantee success. This increases your confidence as you are more and more likely to do the behavior, right? Because focusing on consistency. Basically, mini habits give your brain the sense that success is right there. It's not this huge thing between you and getting to success. It's like, no, it's right there. It's almost guaranteed. And that increases as you, in fact, are successful. It increases your confidence because then you start looking backward and saying, oh my gosh, I keep doing this every day. I'm winning. Like there's evidence that I'm getting better at this thing. Clearly, I mean, look what I've been doing for the last month. It's happening, right? And so there's a special kind of confidence that starts emerging inside of you when you have all of these wins over and over and over again. And it's called self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is your belief in your ability to influence an outcome. So it's kind of like, how confident are you that you can actually do the thing that you're intending to do? Right? You could think of like a 1 to 10 scale. So 1 to 10, are you 5? Are you 7? Are you 2? Well, it's often going to depend on how successful or unsuccessful you've been at that particular behavior in the past. There's this famous psychologist named Albert Bandura, also incidentally from Stanford. he realized that self-efficacy is one of the most powerful predictors of success. If you have a lot of self-efficacy, you're going to actually follow through on your behaviors. If you don't, you're going to put in the effort, basically, it takes to get to the end goal. If you have low self-efficacy, usually you'll give up. So he wanted to know, how do you build self-efficacy? And what he found is, after about 10 years of research, came down to one answer: small successes, small wins. They don't need to be big. They just need to have a pattern of winning, a pattern of doing the harder thing, of doing the new behavior. And if that happens, your self-efficacy level is going to grow and grow and grow. All right, so it matters that you depict those small wins. In other words, it matters that you have a visual system that captures what you're doing every day. If you don't have a tracking system, a habit tracking system, you're not going to tap into one of the deepest sources of motivation, which is a sense of progress. Teresa Mabel at Harvard Business School has shown that she calls it the progress principle. If you can see visual progress, you'll stay motivated. You can see yourself getting better because there's a system and you're keeping track of it, and you can actually point to it and say, look, I'm doing better. Here's the proof. Then you'll stay motivated. If you don't have a system like that, you lose motivation. Yeah, you're doing the thing every day. You just can't quite tell if you're getting better because there's no physical system, nothing to look at and prove that you're getting better. All right, so why do I have Jerry Seinfeld up here? Jerry Seinfeld's a very funny human, obviously. And one of the reasons that he's so funny is he has a really, really good habit tracking system. There was this young comedian who asked Jerry how he became so funny. And Jerry just said, well, I write jokes every day. And this young comedian was like, well, okay, that's nice. Don't we all write jokes every day? I mean, funny joke, Jerry. What's your, come on, dude, you got more than that, right? What's your secret sauce? I mean, how'd you become that funny? Heads above, the rest of us. And he said, well, I mean, that's it. I just do write jokes every day. I mean, I don't know if there's any secret sauce, but he goes, I do have a kind of a system I use. And every day that I write jokes, I put big red X's on a big red X on that day. Once I've done with that day, I put a red X on that day. I've got this wall of calendars, and it just keeps track of my system. And then he said to this young comedian, after a few days, you'll have a chain. Just keep at it, and the chain will grow longer every day. You'll like seeing that chain, especially when you get a few weeks under your belt. Your only job is to not break the chain. So again, what's so powerful, there's a few different principles he's tapping into with this example. One is the visual tracking system. It's visual. You can see it. You can point to it. And once you have a few calendars and you're looking, you're like, wow, I'm really doing something. I mean, you can see it. I can actually see it with my eyes. Think about meditation. I want to create a meditation habit. Well, like, how do you see progress with meditation? What's changing? It's difficult to put your finger on sometimes. What you can put your finger on is whether or not you meditated today. Did I meditate for 10 minutes? Oh, yeah, I did. Oh, yeah. How do I know? Well, it's in my tracking system. You just look right there. Good. So suddenly, what you're focused on, instead of outcomes, you're focused on behaviors. Behaviors are now becoming the metric of success. Whether I did it or not is the thing that you're defining as whether or not you were successful at that thing. And behaviors you have direct control over, whereas outcomes you have less control over. So if you want to lose weight, a lot of us do, and you have some goal of you losing, let's call it, say, 20 pounds, that's an outcome, right? And it's something that you can't directly control. Now, you can indirectly have influence on it, but what you can directly control is whether or not you have a salad for lunch every day. What you can directly control is whether or not you show up at the gym every day, or go for a run every day, or get your 10,000 steps every day. That's behavior. And if your behavior is the metric of success, and you literally create a tracking system like this, your motivation will be bottomless. That's deep, deep intrinsic motivation, and it will fuel your habit forming and behavior change success. All right, number 3, many habits build motivation in this way, by this sort of visual system or tracking system where you kind of grow this confidence and self-efficacy. But they also build motivation in a different way, which is kind of fun, which is that motivation usually comes after action, not before. So if you know this, that motivation follows action, what you can do is you can hack your motivation system. Most of us sit there and wait to feel motivated in order to take action, right? We say to ourselves, I don't really feel like going to the gym. So then we don't go. Or I don't really feel like doing my homework. So we don't go, or we don't do it. We procrastinate. We watch something. We, watch an episode on Netflix, whatever. But if we actually just started the thing that we were avoiding, or I don't want to do the dishes, I don't feel like it. I'd rather just sit here and, whatever, jump on social media. But once you start doing the thing, and one of the ways to do this, to overcome that procrastination hump, is to shrink the size of the task. So let's take the dishes example. I'm the dish guy in our family. I don't like dishes, actually, but I do quite a few of them. So how do I motivate myself to do the dishes? I pick up the family room. Now, wait, James. Why would you pick up the family room? Because that's also part of my nightly routine, right? So dishes and family room pickup are just kind of what I do at night. That's my deal. So I know I got to get them both done. They're linked. I do them right, back to back. But the family room pickup takes about 5 minutes. It's just the toys from the kids. And I got to put it in their bins and, get it. It's easy. It's just pickup, tidying. The dishes on the other end, that's usually a 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes an hour-long job, depends. That's a big one. So if I take 5 minutes, clean up the family room, it looks like I've finished half of my work. Like the family room is done. Oh my gosh, wow. And all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, I'm like, wow, I've got all these oodles of motivation. Dishes? No problem. Totally, of course. Because now I'm in a different state. I just hacked my motivation by taking action on a small thing. And now I want to continue. Think of it this way. Brains hate starting, but they love continuing. Brains hate starting, but they love continuing. So if you can get your brain to start on something, think of your inbox. We've all been here, right? I have 100 unread emails. Oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. Avoid. No problem. Set your timer for 10 minutes on your phone. 10 minutes. Clear out as much as you can in 10 minutes. You'll be able to get rid of a lot of spam, I promise. And then by the end of those 10 minutes, then decide if you want to continue. Right? So 10 minutes, your brain's like, oh yeah, okay, we can handle 10 minutes, but man, I'm not clearing out this whole thing. Then you get going, you're into it 10 minutes, and you cleared out 32 emails. And then you're like, ooh, the timer goes off and you're like, but I can't stop because I'm on a roll, right? Have you ever felt that experience? Again, brains hate starting, but they love continuing. So once you shrink the task to get over the difficulty and get going, take action, then you're going to want to keep going. This is literally the hack of procrastination and the best way to activate your motivation when you're not feeling motivated. All right, so many habits grow. They start small, but they actually grow. How and why do they do that? Typically, it's through bonus reps. In other words, so BJ Fogg, this curious professor at Stanford who would do his 2 push-ups, he would actually add 5 or 10 more each time, 15 or 20. Why not? He already got down on the floor and went through that, right? So he did his 2, and then it's like, why don't we just throw in a handful more? And so bonus reps are typically how habits grow. However, I'm going to just mention this one thing, which is it's also okay to have a small, medium, and large version of every habit. These are called elastic habits, so that the habit is flexible. right? So for example, in my morning run, that I was mentioning, the typical run I do is about 20 minutes. It's about 2 miles. But every once in a while, my 8-year-old wakes up early and she's like, "Hey, Dad." And I'm like, "Oh, I was just about to get out the door. How you doing?" And she's like, "Can I come?" And in that moment, I have a choice, right? I have to either tell her no, or I say yes, but I have to modify the routine because 2 miles with legs that are half as long as mine is a long ways. So I modify the routine. I shrink the difficulty. I goes from about 2 miles to about a quarter mile. We run around the park by our house, and then we go back to the house. Now, I did a mini version of the same behavior. So again, my 2 mile run's my kind of medium level habit. I did a mini version of the same behavior, and guess what? It still counts. It still counts. I still did the thing. This snapped me out of the all or nothing thinking trap. It's like, if it's not a full workout, it's not worth it. It's like, no. You're playing a long game here. You're actually creating a routine. So any one day, the quality of that workout or that whatever you're doing is much less important than the fact that you did something rather than nothing. And then if you want to track a small, medium, and large version of it, let me just show you the actual habits tracker that I now use is this. Let me try to hold this up so you can see. I know the picture is small, but you can see the different colors, right? So these are my habits along this side. Green is a mini habit, blue is a medium habit, and red is the large version of the habit. So again, there's my reading habit, for example, is mostly large. My meditation habit is mostly blue. Exercise is mostly blue. But again, there's some green sprinkled in there, which means those are days that didn't go so well, but I got it done. I got something done. Right? I got the mini version done. Now I have these other habits, which are just growing right now. They're smaller, which is exercise S. There's exercise A, which is aerobic. Exercise S, which is strength, actually. And that's, I'm trying to do more of it. So I've got this sort of push-up, sit-up, routine that takes me, about 5 minutes. But then again, I'm thrown in some blues where I do a full strength workout. Journaling, same thing, right? This is my gratitude journal. So I've got a 1-sentence version, a 3-sentence version, and a full-page version of that habit. Sleep, same thing, right? I've got a small, medium, and large. So again, the tracking system tracks not only whether or not I did it, but what degree of difficulty on that particular day. And then you can start seeing patterns, right, in your behavior. You start seeing like, oh, I'm really staying green on this particular habit. Maybe I want to increase the intensity now that it's established. Or I'm missing days. And if you're missing days, I hope obvious prescription is shrink your mini habit, get it smaller. You really should not miss a day. Mini habits should take 1 to 5 minutes. And even if it's 11:30 at night or midnight or 1 a.m., typically you should still be able to do a mini habit because it's that easy. All right. Number 4, mini habits build willpower, which is this side benefit of building habits over time. Your willpower battery can get bigger, get stronger. So this is just a kind of perk of becoming better at your habits. And the last thing is that mini habits boost autonomy or a sense of choice and flexibility. You can take them on vacation and they don't break. So this is this resilience we're talking about, right? They're small and flexible instead of big and brittle. All right, 3 tips for setting up your mini habits. And by the way, small and flexible instead of big and brittle is a direct quote from BJ Fogg. That's how he frames that. Here's 3 tips for setting up your mini habits. Probably the most important thing you will take away from this presentation is this one sentence. After I blank, then I'll blank. After I put my toothbrush in the toothbrush holder, then I'll write 3 things I'm grateful for in my gratitude journal. After I step out of the shower, then I will meditate for 5 minutes. After I open the fridge, then I will eat 1 carrot stick. After I sit down at my desk, then I will plan my day, plan the 3 biggest priorities for my day before I open my email. right? Set the tone and priorities that I have, and then, dip into what everybody needs from me. So again, after I blank, then I'll blank. If you structure your new habit that you're trying to create in this way, if you write it as this sentence and just plug in those holes, the first hole is something you already do. The second hole, the second blank, is something you're trying to do that's new, a new habit. You're literally piggybacking on top of an existing habit. The likelihood that you'll follow through if you structure it in this way, if you write this sentence, goes from without this sentence, it's 33% likelihood that you'll follow through. If you create it in this way, it goes up to 75% likelihood that you'll follow through. It's insane how powerful this sentence is. All right, so when you set up the habit, this is the way that you set up the habit. The second tip is to celebrate progress. So when you've done something good, when you've done the behavior, tell yourself you just did something hard. Tell yourself you focused on consistency. Tell yourself, nice job, well done. You can do a little fist pump if you want. Actually, on my run, the last thing I do on my run, there's these bushes so nobody can kind of see me, but I throw my hands up in the air on the last corner of my run. Like I'm coming through the finish line of a marathon. I just ran 2 miles, you guys. It's like no big deal. But, I'm like, it's like I can hear Chariots of Fire playing in the background, and I tell myself, nice job. You didn't feel like doing this morning, but you still did it. You just did something hard. You chose the harder option. Well done. Nice job. That releases dopamine, and dopamine is critical. It basically, think of it this way. What the actual neuroscience of it is, it accelerates how fast the habit forms. So if you celebrate immediately after doing the behavior, you're going to speed up your habit forming process. It's a way to hack the speed or pace that your habit forms at. Pretty cool, right? All right, last thing. You don't want to do more than about 2 to 4 habits at a time. Now, specifically mini habits, 2 to 4 at a time. 3 is usually with mini habits. With habits is the number I like best. If it's a full-sized habit or even a hard habit, you really don't want to work on more than 1 or 2 at a time. And again, it takes 66 days to form. So if you've got 6 New Year's resolutions, great. Do one every 2 months. Focus on one. January and February, it's sleep. March and April, it's exercise. May and June, it's my relationship, my primary relationship. Whatever that looks like for you, space them out. Do habits sequentially, not simultaneously. Now, again, this is mostly because of willpower, because willpower runs out. So you can handle up to a point doing more than one. You can do, again, 2 to 4 if they're smaller because of the difficulty thing. You use less willpower when you're doing mini habits. But that's the balance. That's the tension you're always balancing.